and large, it's not really a true winter. Like, reportedly, like further north you go, northern part of Alberta, which be, not too many miles from Alaska, it's tundra, and there's nobody that lives up there, so it's all polar bears. So, but
You're all down here in Florida with me. We
well,
got more Canadians than you probably have in Alberta.
well,
But that exchange rate's looking pretty good. I'm looking for some good listings from the Canadians.
Yeah, no, we're good. We're good up here. We got lots of opportunity. But thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate everything.
I am just starting. Yep, I'm just starting it streaming, and okay. I will get everybody introduced. 1 second. Got it. All right, so I want to thank you. I know we have some people following along on Facebook. We've got some people following along live here on Zoom, and should be able to ask questions in a little bit if you'd like to. We also have, we're going to have a replay of this on LinkedIn later on tonight. That'll play back, and I do want to thank everybody for being with us. We've got a great panel with us today, and we'll talk a lot about what's happening in the business world. If people are thinking about buying or selling a business, if somebody's thinking about trying to figure out what their business is worth and how COVID and some of the quarantines are really affecting business. I'll introduce the people that we have on the panel today. For those of you who don't know them, hang on a second. Let me just make sure you're actually seeing this. You are seeing the picture of Stephen on the right, correct?
Yeah, we are.
Yeah,
all right.
No
so
problem.
Stephen Karbelk has the longest resume that I have ever seen. He sent it to me once. It is 72 pages long. He's working in the Washington, D.C. metro region. Stephen leads the #1 Central 21 team in Virginia, #5 in the U.S. for 2019, #10 globally. He manages real estate transactions nationwide. Hang on a second. Let me just make sure that we're eliminating some of the background noise without losing any of our speakers. Strong background dealing with bankruptcy, receivership, and foreclosure sales, and his knowledge of valuation is absolutely incredible. Second person we have on here is Mark Hansen. For anybody in commercial real estate who doesn't know Mark, he's the leader of Team Hansen. He's one of the most experienced and successful business brokers in the industry, working the Canadian market up to our north. With over 40 years in the business, he's been an international trainer. He is an exclusive business broker and also a wealth of knowledge. This is part of his website, and then I'm going to show this again a little bit later. This is part of his website as well, showing some of the different businesses that he's marketing. Handles a lot of different types of business. Third person on our panel is Julie, and I'm going to butcher your last name, but Drolshagen?
You're close. Drolshagen.
Drolshagen. Okay, that's actually easier. Started her career in Chicago.
Almost Canadian.
Almost. Well, I don't know about that.
Wow.
She started her commercial career in Chicago before going to the Tampa, St. Petersburg area 7 years ago. She also services the Orlando market. She had been with CBRE before coming to Central 21 Commercial, which is why I'm pointing that out, because it's such a great brand. She's also part of Florida CCIM chapter, and again has a strong background in nearly every form of commercial transactions. I also love the name of her website. It's called floridabeachbusiness.com.
Thanks for the plug.
And I said to Julie earlier that I'm usually in Tampa or Orlando at least once or twice a year, but since everything's been canceled, I haven't been there all year. It's driving me crazy. Then we have my friend Bruce Holmes with Central 21 Venture in Augusta, Maine. He had worked in the Boston market before that, before he found his way north almost to Canada. He's got a long history in site acquisition. He's done real estate development, construction management. His team manages shopping plazas and office buildings, and he's got a great breadth of knowledge in business brokerage, as well as just about any form of commercial investment real estate. I've seen him talk about negotiations at international events. Great guy to get to know. And Will Gonzalez is an executive officer for Quain Oak Bank. That's a regional community bank serving the greater Philadelphia market, so we're covering the entire North American continent almost. He's an executive responsible for the bank's lending businesses, and he also has a background in commercial investment real estate prior to getting into banking. And then there's always me. Quick background on me: I'm not an accountant, attorney, or wizard. I am a professor of real estate at the Goodman Center for Real Estate Studies at Lehigh University, where I train commercial brokers all over the world. I've written a number of books and articles, and I'm the president of Central 21 Keim, where we've got a team of about 100 brokers, agents, and appraisers handling Eastern Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So those are the people you're seeing on here today. And most of us are with Central 21 Commercial, which is the most well-known brand in the world for real estate. And I want to get down to our topic today is now really the time to sell your business. Is it the time to get in and buy another business? Are there opportunities out there? What are we looking at? And two of my questions for the panel to start with, I guess, are what businesses, and by the way, I do talk too fast sometimes, I apologize. What businesses might survive in a pandemic and what might not, based on what consumer preferences have changed? And why don't I start with Mark Hansen, if that's okay? If you want to give us your thoughts on what's happening right now in the marketplace.
Well, thank you for giving me the kickstart. That's quite, that question actually varies a lot. There's some you know, state or provincial you know, decisions that are made by governments and local municipalities. It does affect each area. So I don't think what I've seen in Canada, and I particularly concentration Western Canada a lot. So if I'm in the Vancouver, Winnipeg, Calgary, Edmonton market, the impact will depend on what some of the municipalities have done. But I think most of everybody adapts and adopts. And I think that's what we see internationally, worldwide. So the people that I work with, the customer base, we kind of come up with a plan to market that particular business, kind of customize it, because getting the market their business more presentable. So oddly enough, regardless of the decisions made by municipalities, most businesses have been prospering. There's always going to be a business that isn't going to do as well, but they may have been struggling anyways prior to the COVID situation. So I can take that out of the anomaly, because there's something wrong with operations, more particularly than the industry or the business. So there's really no particular answer on what's happening, like, generically, but overall, this has been our busiest year.
That's good. In the northeast of the U.S., we've run into a lot of, I don't know about Maine, I'll have to run that by Bruce, but we've had 90 days of shutdowns all over the place, which has really harmed a lot of businesses, but it depends where you are also. Bruce, have you had experience with shutdowns? I'm not sure if Maine's had the same kind of quarantines that New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania have had.
Well, we've been fortunate in Maine. The COVID it came early like it did everywhere, but pretty much Maine shut down for about 2 months and then began to kind of carefully reopen. So the economic injury to a lot of the businesses was not as bad as it has been in other parts of the country. As far as what types of businesses are actually surviving and some thriving, certainly the grocery stores, they're at it, hardware stores, cleaning companies, liquor stores, there's a pattern there. And some of it is when people are forced to stay home or stay close by, they start looking at, their landscaping. They start cooking. One of the problems we have up here at this point is in New England, where there's always a lot of canning and gardening done. You can't find anywhere white vinegar. You can't canning jars, any of these things that nobody expected would be just sold out, gone. But I do think that the businesses who are able to really internally reorganize and find themselves in the new reality that we're in and doing their business under the new guidelines of the COVID, they're coming out of it, and I think most will do well.
That's good. Stephen, I know you've got a strong background in workouts with businesses and commercial properties. What are you seeing in the DC market? Is there any particular type of business that's having more difficulties than others?
Yeah, I think in markets like DC where the rents are really high, it doesn't take a very long shutdown for a business to get in trouble fast. And there's one that recently filed for Chapter 7 called Waterford Venues, and they had multiple locations where they were just simply a meeting venue. And like we even had our Century 21 meetings every year there. And that company had very high lease payments, high expenses, but high revenue, and normally would be a great business that's been around for decades. But as soon as COVID comes along and everyone stops meeting in person, you're shut down. So clearly, anything that's going to be affected by pandemic or politics in DC is a risky business to be in.
Well, now that you say politics, just a quick segue, and then I'll hit the others. Do you think there's a pro or con depending on who gets elected? Or am I putting you on the spot that you'll be in trouble for later?
No. So, regardless of personal politics, whenever there's change, whenever there's friction, there's transactions. And you just have to think about, who are the winners and who are the losers. And that is, you just be prepared for it. So, yeah, absolutely things would change. We saw even in Virginia when Virginia went blue at the state level, the Virginia General Assembly passed over like 2,000 or 3,000 laws. And so many things changed. Businesses just changed. What you can and can't do or became very restrictive. And in some way, you could say that's bad and it makes things harder. But if you're a professional operator and know how to operate within those restrictions, it's good. So you just have to adapt is all you have to do. But I've always been able to figure out a way to make money in a down economy, up economy, Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. Just your cheese gets moved and just go where it is. That's
True.
it.
For those of you who have not read the book, Who Moved My Cheese, that's one you've got to read.
Cheese.
Yeah, but that's it. But it absolutely will make a difference. And I could see there are some businesses that, maybe, can't trade until after the election. So I'm just going to wait and see.
Will, you're in banking. Have you seen any issues where you've had to do workouts with businesses that are unable to pay their bills? Some of the stuff that's been shut down in the Philadelphia market, of course, where salons and gyms are still shut down, I believe.
Yeah, restaurants are still shut down. So thankfully, we've been okay for the time being. I think it's too early to tell, but I can tell you what keeps me up at night. What keeps me up at night is, in general, the hospitality business. So we have several hotels that we financed out in the Jersey Shore, in the city, in the Lehigh Valley. They need to be at 60% occupancy to break even. Not to mention make a profit. And right now they're at 25% occupancy. That keeps me up at night. And then some restaurants that couldn't pivot. So pizza shops are doing great. Takeout has been through the roof, all good. But a banquet hall, for example, as I think was just mentioned, Steve mentioned, that's going to be difficult. But fine dining restaurants in the city also could not pivot. They couldn't go from fine dining sit down to takeout. You just don't do that in fine dining. So those rents are high. So those restaurants, I wonder how long they're going to be able to hang on until they burn through all their cash. And then I get a phone call in December or January or a bankruptcy letter in the mail. So restaurants and hospitality are sort of what are keeping us up at night. As far as the businesses, I don't think are going to do very well in the next few months. But I think it's still too early, Loren, to be honest with you.
Okay. That's
Just to interject
interesting.
a little bit, according to one of the National Restaurant Associations, they're predicting as many as 85% of non-franchise restaurants may not survive through the COVID.
My
Ouch.
heart. It's tough.
He's got a lot of money on the line with those. Incidentally, we put a small hotel under agreement on the Jersey Shore last week, and if you have any of those hotels that are in trouble, we've got buyers. Just so you know.
I know you do. I will let you know. You'll be my first call. Trust me. I have one in Lehigh Valley. I'm a little bit worried about that I'll be calling you on. I'm sure.
You know, Loren, it's interesting. There's no shortage of cash.
True.
You know,
True.
there are plenty of buyers that could just buy a quality asset, all cash, and because we all know the pandemic will end.
It's going to turn around. You're right.
Right, that's true.
Is it 3 months or is it 2 years or what? It will change, and quality property, quality location will, in the long term, be a good investment.
It's kind of interesting.
We're pretty diverse.
It's kind of interesting. In Portland, Maine, which has been an emerging, booming market in the Northeast, they refer to it as a young Boston. But one of the things that's happened is that there were 3 new construction projects for hotels right by the waterfront in downtown Portland. They all maintained and are full under construction. And the interviews that they've had with the owners are basically, the owners are saying that they are confident that when this thing rolls out a little bit, that people are going to be going within a 2 to 3 hour short distance stay vacation, and they feel they're going to survive and make a lot of money. So hotel business in Portland, we'll see.
Julie, do you want to add something to that as well?
I did, because I echo almost everyone's point of view there. And here in the Business Journal in Tampa, they talk about our grocery market, our grocery sector. It's skyrocketing. Owners are really talking about that transitioning during COVID. When you use the word pivot, I think Will used that, and that's what's happening. Owners that can and have planned for that pivoting role, they're surviving. And another interesting mention, it was today, I think, in the Tampa Bay Business Journal as well. They talk about entrepreneurs and how the SEC may be expanding its definition on accredited investors. So that's good news for minorities, for women, something to look towards in the future. And I always say, with great despair comes great innovation. But here in Florida, we're diverse. So when one falls short, like our tourism, which has had a lot of press, the other picks up. Manufacturing is huge in Florida. Agricultural, we got a big spike. They're all doing strong. We also have a good homeland security, government security is, along with aerospace. So I think it's relative to where you're living, what regulations your state has. And yes, I'm in an area that is heavily tourist and has been hit hard. The restaurants, the hotels, I get it, and there's going to be some people that fall out, and there's also the real estate as our industry here. Real estate has been okay, as some people have thought, or they've called me thinking that we're being devastated. Actually, prices have stayed steady, and inventory is low, but here summer is always low, but there's always opportunity. So there's always buyers and there's always sellers. So I think a lot of people right now are starting to get really positive, and we're going to keep that momentum going.
We're seeing different classes of property selling differently. So, for example, we have a couple of REITs back out of purchasing shopping centers in New Jersey because they're worried about too many stores going dark. If you're buying something at an 8 cap and it's got a relatively narrow margin, and you might lose, let's say, 20% of the tenants, suddenly you're upside down in the mortgage. So people are backing out of retail, they're backing out of office. On the flip side, warehousing is going crazy. Distribution is just insane. And multifamily is still doing well as well. One other thing on financing a business during this type of pandemic, and maybe I'll kick this back to Will for a second, but are you able to finance a business based on historical numbers, since operating numbers are not going to be as strong for some types of businesses in 2020, as you mentioned, hotels at 20% occupancy? they will probably in a year go back up to that 69, 72% occupancy rate. Is that something that can be financed easily, or is somebody going to have to pay cash for it when they're buying that sort of business?
Well, so if it's a hotel, I will tell you, you will have a difficult time finding a bank to sign on for that, unless they have a portfolio, a sponsor, the individual buying it, that has deep pockets and they can weather the storm. So you're absolutely right, Julie, when you say, look, it's a temporary thing. We all know it's coming back. It's just, can my owner hang on? So in other words, can the buyer that's purchasing this building or purchasing the hotel or purchasing the restaurant, are they going to be able to weather the storm for the next 12 months until things get back to normal? So August of next year is likely when this will all somewhat start getting back to normal, let's say. Are they going to be able to take care of it? So that's like the number one thing I look at, Loren, is the business going to be here in the future? And is my current operator looking to buy, refinance? Are they going to be able to hang on? Do they have enough cash to make it happen? It will be difficult no matter who you go to if you're in the hospitality business. However, apartment buildings, it's unbelievable how great deals you can get out there, not from a price point of view, but from a lending point of view, rates are low. So it's sort of like the refinance market and the home buying market, where rates are so low, people are just going nuts, trying to get their piece of the pie now, because they have the cash. So I'd say it just depends on what you're trying to do. But absolutely, I have a hotel now that we're actually in the middle of refinancing from the current lender. Why? Because the current sponsor is more than capable of handling it. But it's just touch and go. It's touch and go, I'd say.
Stephen, have you seen any particular businesses that let me ask you this. Is it a better time right now to buy another business, to try and diversify your portfolio and purchase something? Are you getting decent deals out there?
I've seen most people chasing real estate and not businesses. People wanting to buy actual assets and not just a pure cash flow business.
Got it.
And I think you're going to see, more of that. And because it's, if you've got the actual asset, you got something to hold on to. So we're not doing as many of the, selling a Subway or selling a franchise. We see more on the bankruptcy side, and I think you're going to see more opportunity for buyers that buy a business that was just shut down, and it's an asset sale only, and they're getting it at a rock bottom price. They get to renegotiate the lease, and then have really low overhead to ride out the storm and then ramp up when things get better.
Got it. Mark, you said you haven't had the same type of problems in Canada that we've experienced in at least parts of the United States. Are you seeing anything in terms of businesses that are in jeopardy, that are having problems that might sell cheap? And at the same time, are you trying to sell certain businesses as asset sales, or are they typically going concerns?
Well, thank you again, Loren, for throwing me under the bus. I'm just teasing. I was attentively listening to everybody's comments. And this is my introduction to you guys. So even though I'm a business broker, effectively everything you guys are doing, I do in an indirect way. Like, for example, probably everybody knows who Cadillac Fairview is. They're one of the largest mall owners in the world. So if I go to sell a business in their mall, I'm dealing effectively with the landlord directly, because a lot of the transactions that are happening are renegotiation of the lease. So that helps me when you guys, so a lot, and I'm dealing with a lot of REIT groups as well, Loren, like lots of some of the big ones, because obviously we all know everybody holds all the real estate. So I don't effectively trade in that, but I effectively deal with the same counterparts. Secondly, to financing, a lot of times we're selling property with the business. So we're one of the only brokers in Canada that does do financing. So I work with the lenders directly, and effectively, you know, order the evaluations, appraisals and whatnot, get, you know, so lenders are still aggressively putting the money out as long as you present a decent package that makes sense, right? Because it's not necessarily about pre-COVID or existing COVID. It's about, is the deal bankable? Are the people strong? What, you know, what's their background? What's their net worth? I mean, everything that Will knows about. And you have to, you know, it's all based on an on case basis. So effectively, no, we're problem solvers, right, guys? That's really what our job is at the end of the day, you know, because every client's situation is different, every lender's different. So we just find solutions really is our game, because we really don't sell anything. We just package it. So everything you guys say, I get that about manufacturing. One of the things that I have noticed in listening to your comments, depending on what, I mean, we deal in any level of, our website isn't representative, but we are, some of the stuff we don't put on our website, trading in large conglomerates or oil field companies, that kind of stuff. But all of it, the sales we're doing, 99% of it is assets. The part about manufacturing, what I'm finding internally, we have to deal with some of the largest manufacturers in the world, because you're selling a business where like Singer sewing machines, for example. And that's just one example, but the products, because of COVID, a lot of plants have been closed permanently, right? You guys know that. And so the workers can't come back to work and create the product. So there's a lot of stuff's reopening, and manufacturers trying to come putting their crew back to work. There's a lot of back orders for retailers to get their consumer goods to the stores. So there's been what I would call some panic buying retail wise in Western Canada, where someone who hasn't had I'm just using one example, but there's dozens of examples of it, hasn't had a Singer sewing machine or a Jamoni sewing machine for 10 years, but COVID, they ran out and bought a brand new one because they're going to start sewing during the downtime. And then a lot of things like toys, like a lot of companies, a lot of businesses were, those types of retail business just flourished, other than liquor stores and pizza franchises like Will already commented. But so overall, it's been quite intriguing and challenging times, because how we do business anywhere now is different than we did 6 months ago.
Yep.
And that's really the effect of what's happening up here.
It's funny that you mentioned sewing machines. My wife pulled out a sewing machine when this went into quarantine, and then ended up having to borrow one from somebody. And my wife and daughter got a group together that made, I think, somewhere around 10,000 or 12,000 masks. They just cranking them out all day long.
Yeah.
And they did this here at the chamber as well. They're giving them out.
Yeah.
It was everywhere.
Yeah, people adapt and adopt and find a new way to find a new income stream, and that's brings the best out of most of us, is what the bottom line is. And those, like someone said, some that understand it, especially those buyers or investors with money, they see opportunity. They don't see anything else than that. And so
true.
Those are the winners in the end.
I think one of the things that we're seeing is inventory. Over the past 10 years, small businesses coming on the market for sale, it's okay, but it's not been the way it's coming out right now, where we have an emerging inventory. You've got 65, 40% of the small business owners in the United States are over 65 years of age. 15% of those were military that were given money through the GI Bill to go buy businesses. So I think what's going to happen after people have spent 5 months in quarantine or without being able to enjoy their lives the way they normally would, They've gone into some internal thinking about their lives. And I just think the amount of inventory for businesses going on the market for sale is going to increase substantially. That's going to provide a lot of variety of businesses that's going to attract buyers.
Well, the other thing is a lot of people who were working at, let's say, that Singer sewing factory or wherever, that have been permanently dislocated or permanently unemployed, they may end up getting into small businesses. Years ago in eastern Pennsylvania, we had a very large Bell Labs building, and a lot of the engineers decided they did not want to be relocated to the West Coast. So as they left their positions at AT&T Bell Labs, they opened small businesses, whether that was a Subway restaurant or a Curves or bought a small pizza shop or whatever. It became an alternate method of building a living for themselves, and that may end up happening as well. If I can segue a little bit into valuing business, why don't I come back to Julie for a minute and ask, when you're trying to value a business, now actually Mark had talked about different kinds of businesses. There are manufacturing businesses, there are obviously retail, which is what many of us are familiar with. There are professional businesses. We've sold dental practices to other dental practices as an example. So they fit into a lot of different categories. But when you're looking at a typical small or medium-sized business, how do you start putting that together in terms of valuing that business?
Well, there's several different steps I take. So before I even meet with a business, I'm going to tell them what documents I need. Of course, I need to see their tax returns. Looking at that lease is really important. I forgot who mentioned it, but I was going to bring that up as well. The negotiating with the landlord is very, very important. And I think, of course, when you have a long-term lease, that puts you in a really great place. But one thing I think people need to keep in mind is whether they're buying or they're selling, when they are under a lease, the landlords are increasing the CAM. And these are devils in the details. So when you are transitioning into purchasing a business, make sure you're looking at that lease and the details of that lease. The long term may look good because the price per square foot is reasonable, but you want to remember, check out the CAM charges. So as far as evaluating it, we're going to go in, we're going to find out why they're selling it. That's the most important part. What's their motivation? Is it going to end up being just an asset sale? Are we closing the doors and we're just going to talk about furniture, fixtures, equipment? Do we need to bring in historical sales? Because of COVID right now, I'm finding a lot of my conversations, I'm discussing about the historical numbers. Now, how that affects the bank loan, that's another story. But in a sales pitch, you need to talk about the validity of the actual company. So knowing those historical sales numbers are really important as well.
Bruce, what about you when you're trying to value a business?
Well, old school again, but I've always been fascinated by how some of our buyers look to value the businesses. I'll give you 3 examples. A buyer of a pizza shop, okay, they have a tendency to go park in front of the store, and they'll take their counter and they'll do a customer count at different day part segments during the day, during the week. They monetize that in their fashion, however they do, and that's going to give them what they perceive to be the value of the business. On the other hand, you've got, for a restaurant, certain types of buyers will come through. They're not so much interested in what's going in and out of the front door. They actually are looking at what's going out the back, what's going in the dumpster. It's basically, it's like a dumpster analysis of what's the waste happening with the restaurant as to how well it's doing and how well it's surviving. So it's kind of interesting, from the field work standpoint, how some of our customers are looking at business valuation. But I so totally agree with Julie that I want 3 years of numbers, and I want to see what's happened with management of the building. as well as the financials. And it's a process. It's not a snapshot. It's a historical look at the business, not a snapshot of the moment.
Lauren, I
Stephen?
could
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
I could add to that. Again, I'm listening very attentively. So Julie and Bruce, we could probably, we're off the same page. So what we do is we don't price the business. We don't because the market dictates the value. So again, the comments that Bruce made and Julie made, you can have 5 buyers sitting on, ready to go on one business, and they're all going to have a different opinion of what they view value is to them to make the purchase. So again, we don't make judgment because their opinion is worth something to themselves, and we always say they're always right. So, but what's important is we do collect 4 or 5 years of financial statements. We collect copies of the leases. We do have 90% of the business we sell, our franchises, like Jake, Carl Jr.'s and funny, you keep bringing the words up, Subway. I've actually sold 350 stores myself.
Wow.
And you build relationships, with the franchisor. So the other ingredient is all franchisors have financial requirements for them to be approved. So you have to, and then the banking part of it, and I look at it from a banker's perspective. So when I'm putting together a proposal for a seller, it's kind of like a marriage of, because you can expect, the seller can expect a certain value, but then the bank may not finance it at that level because you're dealing with goodwill sometimes versus there's all these moving components in putting it together. But in the end, what people are really buying, it's not rocket science, is the income. I mean, at the end of the day, you've talked about people leaving their industry, and that's happening as well, whether they were working in a manufacturing plant, whether they're working, as a operator manager for a business. People are stepping out of their comfort zone, going in and buying something for themselves because they buying the income. So the simple answer is, if there's a usable income to justify a wage or a bank loan, then that dictates the price. And people that's what we find why people enter the market. Unless you're, and then we deal with people that in the franchise world where, I don't know if you guys heard about Boston Pizza, but they've entered the market in the US. In fact, I had a client here on Thursday from Seattle, actually. So I do work international. And he was in this area looking for some other stuff. So, but he owns 2 Boston Pizzas down in Seattle. And so what happens in these franchise systems is a lot of people own 10, 20, 40, 60 of that brand, right? So that's a different type of buyer. So they evaluate businesses differently than people getting into their second or third operation. So as much as the sellers or the owners of business would love us to tell them to the penny, to the exact science of exactly what their business is worth, we always say we can't really guarantee that amount because there's too much variation on what the consumers are willing to pay. So that for us gives us kind of a soft spot because the sellers are more patient that way because their expectations aren't as great, because if they want their $2 million, I always say you might sell for 1.2, but if you want it, the market listing price is 2.2, then be prepared for that other offer. And then at the end of the day, an interesting situation, like I've had a business for sale for about a year in Calgary, and it's a liquor store, and it's just booming. And he's had offers at anywhere from 60 to 70% below his asking. And yesterday got an offer for 10% under his asking. And that was because it was the customer that could see the value, and he waited for the buyer. So that's my input on how we go about pricing a business. Because it's unpredictable. At least it is in Western Canada.
No, I get it. It's funny. Everybody has charts on all these different websites as to what kind of multiplier you use to try and value a construction business versus a pizza place versus a theater, and they don't seem to work for too many different types of businesses, unfortunately. No. Stephen, when you're dealing with someone who is trying to sell a business, what are you looking at when you're trying to value that? I know you look very carefully at the FF&E, the furniture, fixtures, and equipment.
A couple things. One, the stability of the income is just critical. Not over 12 months, but every week, every month. What does that look like? And I'm more in the distress world, so I like to just get in and out of the transaction. Usually, if they're calling me, they need to move it quickly, or we're selling it for a receiver or a trustee. So we want to move the business quickly because we don't want rent payments to eat into the sales price. So that's something that we look at. We're definitely looking at the underlying value of the assets, and and what would they sell for at auction, and then we need to beat that price, and then of course what's the motivation of the seller. There have been plenty of deals where the sellers just made a lot of money off of the business, and the sales price isn't really that important. It's a lifestyle decision, and they just want it sold. The one thing I could say that really frustrates me when we get involved in selling an operating business is if you get hired when the business isn't doing well, and then suddenly the business starts doing well, and your client's price changes. They're like, hey, maybe this is a good business to keep for a few more months, or and that's like something that's unlike real estate where it stays somewhat steady. You can have a client that has a really good month, and suddenly they're like not motivated anymore. They forget how bad it was 6 months ago. And that's something that's kind of frustrating about selling a business.
Will, since you're lending money on these businesses, do you have any sort of factor tables or anything that your bank follows, or do you take everything on a case-by-case basis?
I follow the professionals. Whatever you guys tell me it's worth is what I lend on. So we typically do hire a third-party valuation company, and there's a couple components. Part of it is that hard asset that Stephen's talking about. What's the real estate worth? What is the equipment worth? How much inventory do you have? Those are easy because they're you just put a value to them. The question is, what's that goodwill that I believe Mark was referring to? What is that intangible, the thing that you can't touch because the business has been around for 30 years or 20 years, or it's second generation. We do a lot of transactions where the second, third, or fourth generation are buying out family, so you do the valuation based on that. But at the end of the day, it's cash flow. It's how much are you earning? What are you putting in your pocket? What should I expect to put in our pocket over the next 5 years? Discounted a bit, and that's what someone's willing to pay for today. We are able to, and we look at Subway franchises, a couple 100,000 here and there to open one up in a storefront, that kind of thing. It's all based on the projections. A lot of the times you have startups, you got to do an SBA loan. Why? Because the SBA is the only one willing to go with the bank to guarantee the loan in case it falters. Small businesses, startups, they have a high propensity of failing. However, something that's been in business for 10 years, a Subway that's been consistent for 5, 6, 7 years, that's easy because you know what you're going to earn. You back into it. I don't have a multiple calculation that we have a table that we follow or anything like that. Again, I usually hire a business valuation company to tell me what the market's paying for it at that time. But I'll tell you, it's objective. It's what a ready, willing, and able buyer is willing to pay is what it comes down to, the negotiation. And most of the time, that's not 100% accurate. So we end up taking a flyer on it. So we might discount the goodwill to 70% or 60% just to make sure that we're accounting for that difference. We'll do the value of the real estate at whatever that comes in at, but then we'll discount the goodwill to make sure that, because we all know that it depends on how good the operator coming in takes care of business as to whether or not that cash flow is going to continue. So I hope that answers the question. I
It
didn't go
does.
all over.
I put up some of the components of business valuations: net profit, the type of industry, the earnings or the growth trends, the age of the business, which is what Will just said, the business model, whether or not there are any risk factors, whether you're controlling a niche, whether somebody else has come into that niche against you, whether you've got competition, and what the company assets are. Is there anything else that you look at when you're trying to, and I want to get into marketing real quick with this then, but is there anything else that you look at that really helps you to value the business? Anybody want to jump in on that?
Well,
I
one of the
actually, oh,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, interesting enough, I actually find out early on what's going on in their personal life. I mean, we do review the financials, we're looking at everything, but their motivation for selling is really key, because sometimes, and it happens, you're not discovering a lot of financial details that you need to know that may not be on the tax, or you may not see it in a cash flow, and you discover things later on that could actually hold up the actual closing or transaction. So it's important to kind of find out also what's going on with other areas of their life, perhaps, and that leads to their motivation. It will also lead to you got to keep them honest. Everybody wants the highest number for their business, but we have to make sure that we're very realistic in the discussion with everybody.
It's interesting. I'll go to Bruce in a second, but that you mentioned that. I went to a workshop. This is probably 15 years ago, but everybody's got their own methods of working with individuals. And this particular trainer said, you need to get to the emotion, the red behind any transaction. And so they said, you have to ask 10 times in a row, why is that important to you? Beyond what you normally would, in order to get them to tell you the truth. And I had a man and a woman, that man had his arm around his wife, and they were talking about why they wanted to sell and so on. And I kept saying, well, why is that important to you? Why is that important to you? And I got to the last one, and the husband turned around and said, because she slept with every one of my friends. And she said, well, I wouldn't have done it if I wouldn't have had vanilla my entire life. It was unbelievable. And they both ran in different directions. And I stood there thinking, I am never, ever doing this again. So you never know what's going to happen in the real estate business.
Sometimes you're acting as a counselor too.
Oh yeah, definitely. Bruce, what were you going to add?
Well, what I was going to say was that one of the things that we have to look at today is supply line. What is where are they getting their material sources from? Is it something they're relying on shipping? I mean, we've seen, look at the aluminum can industry. It's with the beer and the soda that's been affected. And what's one of the things that we're actually seeing more and more of is these businesses that are focusing on what they can get for their materials and supplies in a more local area, so that it actually it's not it comes into play, I think, when we're looking at a business, or if we're working with a buyer to buy a business, when that issue of, okay, how are they getting their supplies, and is it on a regular feed basis, is there going to be a problem in the future?
Yeah, I think
That's true. Relationship with vendors
and employees. I recently talked to a daycare owner that wanted to sell, and she had a long list of, children, for, to be able to be there, but she couldn't find any, or her teachers to come back. And, at the time, it's when we were having that extra $600 a week payment from the government, but now it's really COVID driven. So I think that's tough too, is the labor market's really tough. Even though there's high unemployment, there's a lot of people that don't want to work. They're afraid.
That's
Definitely
true.
It's sort of that continuity of operations, right? Like, what's the likelihood of this continuing going forward? How's at this level, at whatever level you're buying it at? And employees are key. If we had a customer that was buying a business where the current owner would not allow them to speak to or interview any of the employees on payroll that are currently running the place. And it's like, well, and he was wanting to wanted to move ahead with it. And it's just a risk that is difficult to overcome. Sometimes you can't help it because it's a private thing, but that's another consideration. Good point, Steve.
We'll talk a couple of minutes about marketing if I can, just because we're running on pretty long. I know some of you use sources like Biz Buy Sell. I know there is a problem with selling a lot of businesses, keeping them in the open market where others can see them, because you don't want to lose your customers. You don't want to have your employees scared and leaving. There are a few sites out there that are solid, like Buy Biz Sell. There's businessbroker.net. There's BizQuest, some of you probably use. And of course, I'll show you again Mark's site, which I thought was fantastic for some of the stuff that he does. And even under Julie's site, a nice layout of some of the businesses that are for sale. But what do you use to try and market businesses? Where do you find these potential buyers when you're looking for them?
A lot of times for me, I'm getting them off another listing I have, which is almost like a referral. So whatever I'm doing first for one company, I keep that in mind, whether it's, I'm doing as much as I can strategically on the marketing levels of visualization. So, the YouTube videos, almost producing commercial-like videos and not making it boring. I'm coming at it from a creative standpoint. I'm making sure that, my Twitter account, my LinkedIn, all my social media is all one big campaign. Of course, I put it on Crexy, Biz Buy Sell. And Biz Buy Sell is a big tool for me, even though it can be expensive, but I get a lot of phone calls from that because people see my photography, they see my description. I think a little bit of my corporate marketing background helps out in that, but that's also an advertising tool for me. So every time I list a business, no matter how small, no matter what the size is, it's also an opportunity for people to call me. So I really utilize every resource I can. Like I said, online, print flyers, the outdoor signage, their email blast, and then your pitch sessions on Zoom, like we're doing now. With CCIM locally, you can get on local weekly pitch sessions. Business brokers, there's networks of business brokers you can get online and pitch to them as well. And of course, their own Century 21 network. So utilizing everything, a full, broad marketing plan is really essential.
Stephen, do you have anything you do differently that you can think of?
Well, one is to reach out to franchise reps because they're going to sell it for you in a lot of cases. They want to earn a commission. And when we were selling a lot of hotels, that was like the number one way of getting it is, pursuing those people. But, you got to just call owners. And, back in the day when you could just stop by the competitors and talk to them and say hi and go from there, that goes a long way. But also, as the other gentleman mentioned, that when you're selling a Subway and you think you're just going to sell it to another operator or existing operator, is just to reach out to the franchisor and just ask them, or the franchisee, who is the one that, who should buy this? Who would you be happy with? So you can get a quick approval.
So riffing off Mark's comment about people that own some of these businesses are buyers of more of these businesses, and looking at like a little bit of a target marketing approach, dealing where I do with a lot of restaurants or convenience stores of that nature. One of the things that we found to be extremely effective is we'll actually get with the suppliers that supply the stores, the liquor salesmen, the food distributors, because they're on these routes. They're going all over the region talking to all of the store owners, and they know, first of all, which stores are doing well. They know which stores are going to sell, and they know which buyers are looking to increase the number of stores they own. And that's been extremely helpful.
That's an interesting target market. Actually, I sold a few assisted living facilities a few years ago, and when we did that, we just looked out to everybody in our case, the tri-state area that owned other assisted living facilities and sold them directly. Done the same thing with hotels, and I think we've got 5 gas stations under agreement at the moment. Actually, one of my agents is on the call right now who has them under agreement, but reaching out to other gas station owners. So trying to find a parallel, somebody else in the same field, but I hadn't tried talking to the distributors. That's a really interesting method of trying to build business and find out what everybody else is doing. They'll probably talk. Mark?
Yeah,
From
that's
from
great.
a bank's perspective, if I may,
Yeah.
that's the best credit risk I can ask for. Someone that's already done it successfully 5 times in a row, and they currently have 4 McDonald's in their portfolio. Sure, I'll give them 2 more, no problem. So it really makes us, from a credit perspective, it makes the job a lot easier too. You can get buying a lot quicker.
I can add to that. I mean, whether it's Julie's comments or Bruce or Loren, I've been practicing this for 45 years. So, like I say, when I train people, like every year after is in the real estate industry, it's still your first year because you're still learning. But at the end of the day, I'm kind of like the best kept secret because, for example, Dairy Queen, you guys are familiar with that franchise in Subway because we've talked about it. So Dairy Queen's international, but so we do have contact with all the franchisees in those franchises because once you sell one, you get to meet someone who, oh, I own a Dairy Queen, and the next thing they're buying Dairy Queens. And this, what happens is the marketing starts with a website like BizQuest or Biz by Sell or This is for Sale because you start getting your buyer base. But at the end of the day, when you start, and the field consultants for each of the franchisors, so we build those relationships and have for years. So they're telling other franchisees or is in the system that, Team Hansen sold, the franchise in such and such a city. You should contact him when you're ready to sell. But so we do all that stuff. We do an annual newsletter, all those things that everybody talks about, email blasts. But one of the differences is that, again, our website is not fully representative to what we actually do. So I did sell a car dealership once, and then I sold an RV dealership once. So then what happened is I got a list of all the general managers and the ownerships of other car dealerships in the same brand from this existing seller. So it becomes a delicate situation because some of it's confidentiality, right? Of giving out marketing lists of people. But so I emailed everybody and said, hey, we have a great opportunity. In that industry, all they needed to know was units sold because the amount of service work they were doing in the back, the amount of parts they were selling, because everything had a different margin. So when you give them the basic information, because you don't necessarily make the money on the car, you make the money on the after service. But at the end of the day, I emailed, I think it was 700 people. Guess how many replies I got on the email? Just take a guess. 3. So then what I did is I put together a professional letter, and I actually mailed a letter to everybody, the same people. Guess how many replies I got in 1 week? 78. So in contrary to popular belief, electronic media doesn't necessarily, everybody thinks that electronic media, Twitter and everything else. So when we take a new listing on a Subway, we will send a letter to every Subway owner in Western Canada. And to this day, and my son works for me, he's 28, and he's been working, he's as good as I am, probably better in some ways. You have to understand that what is old is still new. And when you can get that through your mindset and do things, like the phone's still the best tool we have. And Zoom calls are great, and this is the first one. But at the end of the day, it's still the face-to-face, it's still the one-to-one. And you put your energy in that, your business will multiply beyond comprehension. And honestly, I'm spending more money on postage
Yep.
than anything else and I will not stop, because percentage-wise, we can send out 20,000 emails on a new annual newsletter, we call it, and yeah, it'll get us busy. And then the people keep it, and then then they email you back 6 weeks or 6 months later. Hey, is this business still for sale? But at the end of the day, we do mail those same consumers because we have their actual mailing address.
Yeah, it's a really good mix.
And you get better. They get a brochure professionally done, pictures updated on the market, updated on financing. That envelope, when they open it, if it's personally addressed, if it's not junk mail, and we have a program where we can do those. Like, you can hire these professional companies that, that Sears hires, or whoever hires, or Best Buy hires, to do their email marketing, and they guess what? Most people delete it.
Right.
And
You create your own databases? We create our own databases, and yeah, we're doing the handwriting letters and the follow-up.
Yeah. We have a program that we've created where we could cross-reference, right? You push a button, the labels are printed, boom, the letters come out, and it's just multiplied. The girls will just be stuffing envelopes for 2 days. But
there's one thing that print media has, and that's shelf life.
yeah,
That's
I never
true.
heard of it. Yeah. And you know what? True story. About 3 weeks ago, I got a phone call, and the guy said, yeah, I kept your letter from 5 years ago. And I still have my business card on my computer, and I wasn't ready to sell my 5 units of franchises, but I'm ready now. And we get that all the time. So, and so, I don't know. It's kind of my passion. I get frustrated, I guess. That's the only thing that frustrates me today. Nothing really does frustrate me. To listen to hear all these people about how electronic medium and Twitter and everything, I mean, they're all good. Instagram, wherever you want to present yourself. It's a quick and easy fix for somebody who wants to search and find you and just get quick information. But the bottom line, once you get the customer, if you're mailing them, they'll they'll refer you through word of mouth, because they just got the letter, and now their friend is saying, I'm thinking of selling my business, who you don't know. They say, oh, well, I just got something from this group. If you're thinking of selling your business, and that comes more from mail than it does from email. Anyways, that's me. I'm kind of stubborn that way, sorry. But it really, truly works.
Yeah, I think you have to do both, in today's
Yeah.
market, and depending which one you're representing, what type of business. In Florida, we're a little bit more, a lot of people are coming and going, shall we say. We don't get a chance. I'm from Wisconsin, almost Canadian. So we don't get a chance to build some of those relationships as often as we like. So on one hand, you got to rely on some of the branding that all the channels are giving you. But yes, you got to knock on those doors and send those letters out. And I can't wait till we can see each other in person again.
Yeah. So
you can start having those conversations and building those relationships. Real estate's the same way. You just have to have those relationships. And, there's nothing better than someone to call you, like you said, and they've had your business card or your letter, or they remembered something you said. They just met you. Somebody said they met me once at a restaurant. I gave them my card, and they weren't ready. But boy, they remember the conversation and how great it was to talk to me. I don't know what I said, but I'm sure I was talking in Florida. And then they were ready to purchase. And it was the greatest compliment. So keeping all of that in mind in our customer service that we have to do, I think, is really essential.
Bruce, is there anything that we missed that we should put into this workshop today? Panel discussion.
Well, one of the things I think that is going to come about, or perhaps already has begun to, as a result of the pandemic, and talking with a number of attorneys, and right now I'm negotiating a $1.4 million distribution center, and the changes in the industries that has happened, either by law, federal, state, or by consequence of pandemic, whatever. is going to change the contracts and the legal interpretations of the agreements that we are using for the sale of businesses. Because a business, could all of a sudden not be in business by law or by pandemic, lose their base. So you've got issues like situations like force majeure, that is the act of God sort of thing, that in a buyer's situation, buyer buying a property, buying a business of this nature, if something were to catastrophically change, i.e. pandemic, then they want the force majeure in place. They also, and with business sales, they're going to be looking at, the effects of the business, substantial business effects. So all of this is going to be changing in our contracts.
Well,
A
and
great
also, time kills all deals. And so a transaction at a slightly lower price that will close quickly is definitely the better deal than the one that's going to, I wouldn't want to do a deal that's 60, 90 days out right now, because you just don't know. It could be a totally different deal in 90 days.
Yeah,
Sure.
So
Anything else we missed, Steve, that you want to add to our discussion?
I really like the whole idea of, sometimes you go old school and send them a letter, send them a thank you note. I've gone as far as, even if it's someone I really wanted to make sure I got a hold of, is you send them a FedEx or even a priority mail, for $6 or $7, because I've never known anybody to get a priority mail envelope and just rip it up. You might rip up an envelope, but you would never get a priority mail envelope and rip it up and throw it away without looking at it. You would absolutely open it up. So if you really want to make sure you get a hold of someone, you pay the $7 or $8 and you'll most likely reach them. But if you also did that with a 20-something nowadays, they'd look at you like you were crazy. And why you're not messaging them on TikTok or something. So it's really about knowing your market, that's for sure. But the personal touch, once you've made that contact, is always critical. We all have great stories of how we showed up, met someone, and made a lot of money. But I do believe that if you're not doing enough business, it means you're not talking to enough people. So you just need to get on the phone and start making phone calls. Start asking them how things are going. Start telling them what you're doing, and people will just naturally want to help you.
I don't know if anybody's trying to sell commercial real estate on TikTok, but I don't know if that's an interesting idea or if it's just crazy.
Well, I'm not doing it. I'm just saying. But reaching the millennials and then all the other names you want to call them. But
I think you'd have to dance while you were, talking to them about the commercial real estate building, I think. Will, anything you'd like to add? Some last words?
Well, I can just say I can see you doing that, Loren, for sure. Dancing on TikTok trying to sell real estate. But what I'll tell you is the one thing, just a tip. It's one of your bullet points here. Be sure your records are up to date. All I'll say is if you're trying to sell a business, and everyone on the call will know this, on the panel will know this, if you're trying to sell a business, you have to quickly be able to identify owner expenses that aren't going to be there going forward. If you pay your cell phone bill, your car payment, your whatever, those are things that are not going to continue. If you have all those records together for the last 5 years, let's say 3 years at a minimum for the business you're trying to sell, it'll be 10 times easier for the professionals and the lenders to get behind the numbers. So if you're trying to sell, just get your records in order, as you say on that.
Absolutely. Mark, any last words?
Again, thanks for giving me the last words. Actually, this has been a really
last words, Mark.
refreshing,
We hope it's not.
enlightening opportunity. Obviously, we all have the same knowledge. We all have the same skill levels. We're all pretty diverse, and we all know the same thing. Stephen made the last comment, which is, if you're not making enough calls, you're not doing enough business. But so we all know what to do and what not to do. So today was a reminder for all of us that keep doing what we're doing. And maybe we picked up a few tips today that we can add to our efforts, and we're all going to be very successful. So thank you again for allowing me to have the opportunity.
Well, thanks for being with us. And I'm hoping to stop up there in Canada and do a TikTok ad with you. Just, no, I'm kidding. And
I don't know
Julie,
about that. You're gonna have to twist my arm on that one.
Mark is out. Mark is out on TikTok.
Yeah,
Oh, boy.
there you go.
Julie, last words?
Well, one thing is I was thinking about the noise around us. And if you guys ever were in living in the city, there's so many horns blowing and all this other stuff, and you just got to roll up your window. And so I think about right now that we just need to roll up our windows, get a lot of this noise away from us, keep our eye on the prize, wait for that green light, be prepared, and also have our businesses that we're representing be prepared, and especially like with the records you mentioned earlier, Will. And gosh, it was great meeting everybody. When you guys are in Florida, please look me up.
Sounds good. Thank you, all of you, so much for participating. I think this was great, and I will get you copies of this video, and it will be on LinkedIn later on today as well.
Thank you, Lauren.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Lauren.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one.
Bye.
Good luck to all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Same to you.